Oh dear. Obviously you can edit the first bit of it, John. I suppose we were, we were thinking about, coming up to the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Mm-hmm. And suppose we've been, having a lot of conversations with young people through our Peace Youth Summits, which have been amazing and brilliant and inspiring and thoughtful, and I think young people have a lot to say about this place and where we live and how we live in it. But suppose I was just keen to reflect with Corey and Ryan here in terms of my journey in the organisation and peace building and what that suppose means to me and what it means to Corey and Ryan. Suppose I started in Youth Action primarily and applied for the job because it was a secular organisation, and that was in the mid-80s, and for me, suppose that was really important, and I felt the need for a secular organisation at that time, and really excited by the fact that there was a secular organisation. I obviously, I'm a youth worker, so I came through youth work in a church setting. I was a woman of faith, I was a Sunday school teacher and all of that, but still feeling the need for a secular organisation, and had people, suppose, who inspired me, growing up, and also like I'm an Irish woman. I come from Monaghan, but I have both. I'm Irish by birth, but I also have an Irish and a British outlook, from being a Protestant born in Monaghan and moving north. But suppose there was people I was inspired by, in Lisburn. I was inspired by ecumenical ministers who felt that we all should be working together, and inspired by things like, I was supposed to talk about being a woman of faith and stories like the Good Samaritan in the Bible, and the whole context of that was about the Samaritans and the Jews, just hating each other and both believing in the same God, but the message, suppose, of the story was that, it doesn't matter who we are or, what our identity is, that we should be helping everybody, doesn't matter who they are, and looking after people. So that was, suppose, really important to me. And suppose in my early days in the organisation, it was very much about focusing on community development, about rural community development, and suppose recognising the need, for people who weren't included and involved and left behind. And in relation to peace building, it was always about thinking about who wasn't in the room and who wasn't involved. And suppose I was inspired by that through Niall Fitzduff, who headed up the Rural Community Network in the first instance, who was a great inspiration to me, suppose, at that time, and still would be, in terms of the messages they were talking about. But in any of, suppose, of my work and throughout, suppose, rural community development, through, Young Women's Conference I was involved in and talking about equality, it was always about who are we leaving out here. And that, suppose, is a message that I would even talk about in relation to doing safeguarding training and what policies are important to us. We obviously talk about particular things around safeguarding and vetting, but it's also about equal opportunity. And equal opportunity for me is something that is so dear to me in terms of where Youth Action comes from. And suppose since our inception, in 1944, that was always something that was what we were about, and something that for me is dear to the organisation. Before there's legislation in place telling us we should do this, but I suppose, more recently, suppose in terms of peace building, it's always been about, as a youth worker and an educator, it's always been about getting young people together to listen, to learn, to understand, to plan, to work together, to do things, to realise that we can build peace and the possibilities of peace. And I think it's even more important now, in civic society, of which we are a part of in our organisation, that we, show leadership and we work with young people to do that, because sometimes there's a vacuum in leadership, and I think we've got to just get on with it, you know what I mean? But I do feel really hopeful, because young people talk to me about not wanting to be labelled, to be pigeonholed, to be seen as this particular identity, even though that identity would be really important to them, you know, and it's like me talking about being Irish and British, European, you know, having a view to a Commonwealth and stuff, and all of them are important, and that's, I suppose, what I get inspired and I'm motivated and feel hopeful about. In terms of the way young people talk about, don't pigeonhole me into a particular identity. I am more than that, and I'm all of this, like, and I know, Corey, in conversations with yourself, like, that is something that you feel really strongly about, you know, in terms of where you come from and I suppose what peace building means to you. Like,
yeah. Because whenever we talk about peace building, sometimes I can only think about what our young people are actually saying and not what we have always talked about. Like, whenever we did the show Somewhere Only We Know last year, all the young people talked about was the issues that mattered to them, and like, we're always talking about sectarianism, but for our young people, it's literally at the bottom of their priority list. You know, they want to talk about schools and education and LGBTQI issues. Like, there's things that are so much more important to them now. And what they also talked about in Somewhere Only We Know was feeling like they were being handed an identity from their parents. Like, here's sectarianism, this is what you have to care about, whenever they really didn't. You know, and they do say that it's not a priority, but even we see it in our young people that they still go, oh, what school did you go to, or, you know, what area are you from, to like try and decipher what your identity is. So it's funny that they think, oh, we don't care about it, but they still are in the habits of trying to figure out somebody else's identity. And something that we've talked about before is something that's important to me in youth work, is getting opportunities for more mobility for our young people. Because as somebody who went away for university, I was baffled when I went away and nobody cared that I was a Catholic from West Belfast. And that's why we would need more opportunities like that for our young people, so that they can go away from Belfast and just like, and get away and realise that they are so much more than just a Catholic or just a Protestant or from this area, you know, that we're so much bigger than that, and there's so much more to us than the identity that we can feel like that we're handed down by our parents.
But I love the way that you talk about Ballymurphy. You know, I'm so proud to be a young woman from Ballymurphy.
Yeah.
You know, but you would also say to people, but I'm also this, and I'm also a woman, and I also care about LGBTQ rights, and I also care about, you know, that I'm all of these things. Don't just pigeonhole me into that one place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like, I would have a similar experience. I grew up here in Northern Ireland. I grew up in the Protestant background, and my parents were very sectarian. You know, it was almost like the Catholic was the boogeyman. You know, and I had like almost like learn. Still to this day, can't ever remember, like, because even at the time couldn't fully process it, but it was like, you know, in case I got stopped one day in Belfast at 6 years of age, you know, and be asked, like, where are you from, what school did you go to, what football team, you know, whether you say Cliftonville or Linfield, depending on where side. So I was almost, like, grew up afraid, even though we actually had family that were Catholic, but at the time they didn't speak to. Now, in the last few years, I found out that they actually did become Catholic themselves, but we moved over to Scotland whenever I was 13, and it's interesting that you say nobody said anything, because actually, even though I grew up Protestant, and at the time we actually had a season ticket for Rangers, I actually got picked on because there was an assumption that we're all Irish means all Catholic, and then that automatically means you're a Celtic fan. So even though I was going to Ibrox that weekend to see a Rangers match, which, by the way, didn't actually even watch the football, I have no interest in football, I used to watch the time watching things, but I get picked on for supporting Celtic. Or what even baffled me was the first time I opened a bottle of Coke, or like in front of like a group of teenagers in my class, and I started drinking from it, and they were staring at me really intently, and I'm like, is there something on me? And they were like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, what about politics, about the news, you know, what our current climate is? I what do you mean, what do I think? And they're like, is that not the first time you ever had Coke? Like, this was like 2007, 2008. Like, how many years have we grew up with Coke over here? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know. But then I joined the army at 16 and down in England, and it's quite interesting being in the army at that age, because 16 you think you know everything, but it's baffling that at 16 years of age, only now looking back in hindsight, that I had a gun put in my hands. I was trained in how to kill, fight for peace. You know, it was seen as an honour, noble thing to die for your country. Well, I wasn't English myself, do you know what I mean? You know, but it was seen as this noble thing. and like, and I'm like being trained to kill for peace is surely like it's kind of counterproductive. Do you know what I mean? Because surely the more bloodshed there is, the harder it is to actually achieve peace. And then so whenever I came back over here, around I think I was 17, about to turn 18, by myself. So my parents are still living are still living in Scotland. So I moved back over here, stay with my granddad and stuff. And for the first time living right in the heart of Belfast, there were some changes I saw. Some perceptions went straight out the window, because even growing up, I never liked to associate straight off the bat, what does it matter whether you're Protestant, whether you're Catholic, what do you believe in? I'm more interested in, and if you know me, you'll understand the joke, but are you interested in Batman? Are you interested in Superman, Spider-Man, comic books, movies? Come on. Because I think there's something even interesting in, there is more to young people's identities, and that's culture. Do you know what I mean?
When you would talk about that, Rand, too, especially the online world that a lot more young people would live in than I would live in, to be fair, and that doesn't have any borders. And as you say, you could be talking to a young person in Australia and China, whatever this, if they're interested in Batman, I'm interested.
And that's actually what I find.
I'll communicate with them.
That's what I find interesting about peace building, because whenever I first got into youth work, my main prerogative was just doing stuff around mental health. Do you know what I mean? I don't even think I heard of peace building, to be honest, because that's another thing growing up here is, to be honest, the Good Friday Agreement, even the Troubles themselves, all that conflict, other than the stuff that your parents, depending on what side you grew up on,
handed down to you.
But you only get told one side. You don't get told actually what happened in this country. So we weren't even taught in our own schools about the Good Friday Agreement. Do you know what I mean? It was just something that you heard occasionally on the news when I was a kid. You're waiting for Simpsons to pop while I was like 3 or something. To come on. But like whenever I got into peace building, it is so hard, like integral to the root and foundation of all the work we do, and there has been a lot of great progress made, but like you said, Corey, young people, there's so much other stuff you want to talk about, or there's other stuff that's happening, like talking about the online stuff, like the way I've developed the research about the incel community, how it's misogynistic and violently extreme towards women. It's still something that's not really talked about over here. Do you know what I mean? And one of the things I love about culture as well is young people really embrace it, especially the comic books, or in Belfast we have QCon where young people dress up in anime, and that's the beautiful thing is you'll never see these young people interact and go, where are you from, like other than like actually like just a nice normal, because like in Scotland and in England, as you would find, getting given the question where you're from doesn't have quite the same
connotation.
I suppose whenever you were talking there, suppose about your parents and what my parents told me, it reminded me of this amazing piece of theatre, Suitcase Theatre. The Rainbow Factory did, called The Other Side of Peace. And the key message within that was, don't just pass on the story you've been told. Listen to the other stories and pass that on as well.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I thought it was brilliant. A really simple, straightforward message, and suppose that at one level can encapsulate what we think about peace building, and obviously you're recognising, in terms of where young people are at, in terms of who they communicate with if they're interested in a particular thing, but I thought that was a brilliant piece of theatre in terms of what it was saying to people. Whenever we think about who we are and where we're from in this place, like, don't just keep, whenever you say around, what my parents passed on to me, and similarly, I could be talking about what my parents passed on to me, but it's important for me to take responsibility and listen to other stories.
And it's about building experiences as well, because our parents teach us their stories from their experiences, their traumatic experiences, and I can't blame them for thinking the way that they think or feeling the way that they feel, and would never deny that.
I know if you went over to Belfast and they
because of growing up in Rainbow Factory, I have a lot of positive experiences with people who would be considered the other side of the community, and that's why we're moving forward now, and that's why our young people are moving forward now, because we have places like Youth Action, like Rainbow Factory, where they can come and build positive experiences, and that's what's going to help us progress. And the reason that our parents haven't progressed is because of the experiences that they had growing up.
And what you're talking about there is also another different community, and that's what young people love, is these different communities that are almost like, we're in the 21st century now, and young people really are like, they want to be proud of who they are, maybe their religions or where they came from, but they want to embrace different aspects of life. And I've often said you can't spell community without unity. Feeling that's just my 2 cents for the
I've never heard that.
2 cents for the day.
Oh, I like that. You can't spell community without unity. Yeah. I like that, yeah. But it's that openness, you know, that's what I was saying about being hopeful, you know, and about young people not wanting to be labelled. But it's like you're saying about Ryan, like, young people want to, you know, they see all these other different cultures and connecting with people. That it enriches them.
Yep.
Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
enriches them.
Like even if you walk down the city,
It doesn't diminish them and who they are. It enriches their life, like, and
Absolutely.
these experiences that they have.
Yeah, like
And
you
what
walk,
else to
walk
find?
down the city centre, how many different like of those Asian tea houses now with the bubble teas.
Yeah.
Even the Christmas market, everyone loves to go to the German breakfast
Yeah.
or the different ones that like give you a wee bit of flavour or like taste of different life around the world. And do you know what I mean? A lot of young people talk about how they want to go and, do you know what I mean, embrace these different aspects and cultures, and they're more engaged in, and even simply like years ago, like I says, growing up, I wouldn't have thought about growing up Protestant, talking to a Catholic, whereas now, like you said, with those different experiences, I have a Catholic girlfriend, do you know what I mean? And what was even interesting is like, I look back when I first told my granddad, do you know what I mean? He didn't know where she was from. And I was like, oh, she's a really lovely girl. And he's like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. And I was like, oh, she's in university.
He was trying to figure it out.
Trying to figure it out. But
figure
he was starting to turn and doze
What's
off. And then
her
as
name?
soon as I said, she's from Hoglass, it was like, you ever seen Popeye take the spinach? He just gets straight
Shut
up
up.
and goes on about honey traps, stuff that happened in the 70s,
Yep.
you know, all this sort of stuff. And I've often joked now, you know, well, I think it's been about 7-8 years now. I think if she was going to kill me, do you know what I mean? I've given her enough excuses that it's nothing to do with religion. But B, I think maybe it's actually the other way around. I think she's trying to convert me to the other side. But I just forgot this was recorded, but I don't think she'll see this.
I know, but I think when you're talking about experiences, I think you know, because you're talking about the Reba Factory and how you've experienced all these really positive things with young people from where
Yeah.
they're from and stuff like, and that's what we need, you know, and
Yeah.
especially suppose coming out of COVID, and I mentioned that big C word, you know what I mean? How important that is now, you know, because it's obviously good for young people's mental well-being
Absolutely.
to get out there and enjoy and have fun, you know, because we pass on, and we do, and I recognise where I'm from and the age I am now, how we pass on our anxieties to young people.
Yep.
But, you know, young people have got to enjoy being young
Yep.
and
Oh,
going
yeah.
to your festivals and just, you know, having big fun events where young people come together and never speak of just being in a room together.
Yep.
You know, and I suppose that's what's wonderful about youth work and what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.